Couple of other circulatory items we're going to take care of here today in a couple of videos. First of all, we're going to look at some of the changes that occur in this area just out in front of the developing heart and the embryo. You recall in this stage of the embryo, we have an atrial chamber, a ventricular chamber, the sinus venosus back here, our endocardial cushions forming and coming together here. This region we call the conus arteriosus right through here. And up in front, we see the beginning of a couple of aortic arches that go around the pharynx on the left and right side. So we have aortic arch 1 and aortic arch 2 developing here early on in the embryo. There's a pair of aortic arch 1 and a pair of aortic arch 2 that go around the pharynx. So the pharynx would come right up through here, and these would lead into the dorsal aorta there. In development, theoretically, there are 6 aortic arch pairs. I say theoretically because they never actually all form at the same time. They're thought to form in sequence, with the first couple forming and then dropping out before the last arches ever develop. So next, in this view, we still have our ventricle down here, atrium there, conus arteriosus. This is sometimes referred to as a ventral aorta in this region, but it's actually more of just a sac, sometimes referred to as the aortic sac, sticking out there in that area. And from that we get the aortic arches to go out around the pharynx. Now, if they all existed at the same time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, it would look something like this. And they would all connect to a dorsal aorta. Now, early on and in the head region of the embryo, there's a left dorsal aorta and a right dorsal aorta. They don't all come to the same structure. And then the 2 aortic portions in the head come together as a single dorsal aorta further back in the body in there. But anyway, as the embryo develops, as I mentioned, we don't ever have all 6 aortic arches there at one time. Aortic arch 1 and aortic arch 2 drop out first. So we have a 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then fairly soon we're going to see the loss of number 5 as well. So we're going to have 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we're going to leave this viewpoint and go to a dorsal look, looking down on the developing aortic arches next. So now here we are looking down on the top of this. So this would be down coming up out of the heart, that's more ventral, further back away from us. This would be the conus arteriosus, I'll label CA there. And so this sometimes thought of as a ventral aorta, as I said, or sometimes called the aortic sac, that area in between there. And then we had aortic arches 1 and 2, pairs of 1 and pairs of 2 drop out early on. This is number 3 now. Then after that is number 4. Number 5 is going to be lost. We're going to take it out. It's not going to be there anymore. And then we're going to have number 6 right here. So we have 3, 4, and 6 on either side. Number 5 is gone. 1 and 2 have already long gone. And where number 6 is, we're going to grow some new vessels off of number 6, and number 6 we're going to not connect, well, at least for now. We'll think of it that way. We're not going to have the connection of number 6 to the dorsal aorta. So we grow new, these are going to become pulmonary arteries to your left and right lung, growing off of number 6. And the connection of the dorsal aorta here that we see on this side is going to be cut between numbers 3 and 4, right there. So all of the blood circulation number 3 is going to run forward, not backwards, and all the circulation number 4 is only going to be able to travel back from the anterior part, not forward. And most of the connection to number 6 is lost on either side, and number 5 is gone entirely. So let's see what we're going to look like after that. These are two successive images, this one being a little earlier, this one being a little later, in the same progression. So we've lost arches 1 and 2 up here. We no longer have a dorsal aorta on either side, on both sides I should say, that connects between 3 and 4, arches 3 and 4. So this was part of number 3 here. This becomes eventually the common carotid and internal carotid. But the base is common carotid, up here it's internal carotid. We'll just label it here, common carotid artery, common carotid artery on either side. Our fourth arch that comes off here will eventually become our subclavian, and this part of the fourth arch over here is going to become our primary aortic arch that sends blood down through the thoracic cavity and then down into the abdominal cavity and to the legs and so forth. So your major aortic branch is on the left side, your body's left, extending down from there. Number 5 is gone. Number 6 is kind of split between a couple of things here. The original number 6 has a little bit of a spur that connects between the pulmonary circulation here and the dorsal aorta below the aortic arch. Remember, we grew new pulmonary arteries. I'm going to label this PA here on this side and PA over here. These are pulmonary arteries that came off of the 6th arch. So we lost most of our 6th arch over here and grew a new pulmonary artery. We still have some of our 6th arch over there and the new pulmonary artery off of that there. Right in here, back in the conus arteriosus and truncus arteriosus, the base there next to the heart, there's some changes occurring inside that split that vessel into 2 parts. It forms what's sometimes referred to as a spiral valve, so that the blood that's on the right side of the heart gets pushed into the pulmonary, into the 6th arch components there, and the blood that's on the left side of the heart being pushed up through here is rotated back around and pushed into the primary aorta in here, the systemic circulation. So we lost 1 and 2, we lost 5, we lost most of 6 on this side, we still have a little bit of 6 over there, and we have an outgrowth from 6 on both sides as the pulmonary artery. This is our aorta here, and that's our pulmonary artery, our primary pulmonary artery, sometimes called pulmonary trunk, right through here. Now let's look at the next stage. Right here, we see a continued separation of things in that region. Most of what extends out over on this side right here, we had a little bit of number 4, arch number 4 in there, and this was number 3. Remember, this is still our common carotid. Artery here coming from branch number 3, this part of number 4, and the old aorta out here. This becomes the subclavian artery. Here on the body's right side, this portion that's still fused together right here is the brachiocephalic artery. Over there, this is still our aortic arch. This is still number 4. There's still a bit of number 4 in here, and this is number 3. And that's still common carotid artery, same as 3 on the other side. This is pulmonary artery on our right side. Here's pulmonary artery on the left side. And we still have this connection of number 6 right here. That allows pulmonary circulation blood of the embryo to bypass the lungs and go straight into the aorta. This vessel that bridges between the pulmonary artery here and the aorta, the old sixth arch, it's called the ductus arteriosus. After birth, it will collapse and close up and no longer allow pulmonary blood to go directly into the aorta. Make sure that all of the pulmonary blood gets sent to the lungs, not bypass the lungs, as it does in this case. By the time we get to the mature circulatory pathway here, it looks very little like what we started with. Remember, we had our conus arteriosus here. It was split internally into two different passageways. Eventually, those internal passageways enlarged to the point that these look like completely separate vessels. You can't tell that they were ever part of the same structure. So we have our pulmonary trunk. I'll label PT there. Pulmonary trunk, the very base of our pulmonary artery. This is going to be your right pulmonary artery. I'll label RPA over here. It'll be left pulmonary artery on this side. So pulmonary trunk and our pulmonary arteries, left and right. The aorta came from what was originally just this, what we call the the aortic sac there at the base. And from that we get all of these different things that originated. Remember, this was part of number 3 up here, part of number 4 over here. This was our right dorsal aorta, like that, RDA over here. But now this is all going to be the subclavian on this side. Number 3 is that common carotid. This is number 3 on the other side. We have a new vessel come up over here to form the subclavian on this side. So we have a new subclavian artery on the left, right there. Some remnant of number 4 rests in here somewhere, and then the rest of this over here is going to be your dorsal aorta. That's the old left dorsal aorta over there on that side, connected by what was number 4, arch number 4. There's still a connection between the right pulmonary artery and the dorsal aorta right through here. And after birth, as we said, that connection closes off, and that's left there as simply a fibrous remnant of the old ductus arteriosus, and we call this the ligamentum. Ligamentum. Can't spell. Ligamentum arteriosum. It's just the remaining ligament of the old sixth arch connection between the dorsal aorta and that sixth arch, the pulmonary portion. There. So important things to remember. We had a symmetrical kind of origin to this whole thing with arches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 3 becomes carotid arteries. 4 becomes subclavian here and part of the dorsal aorta, or the aortic arch, I should say, over here. The 5th is gone. The 6th arch had a left and right connection to the dorsal aorta. We completely lose it over here on the right side. On the left side, we don't lose it completely until after you're born, and it closes off and remains as ligamentum arteriosum. In the base down here, we mentioned that we had in the conus arteriosus a partition that formed, a spiral valve that separates the blood that's going to the 6th arch arrangement, the new pulmonary part, and everything else that included basically 4 and 3 up above. Now we're going to look at some similar images in your textbook. First of all, in the first image, we have that aortic sac. So here in the blue, this is coming directly off of the heart, the blood flowing into that sac. This is a look from below instead of above. You can see that arches number 1 and number 2 indicated by dotted lines. That's all gone. So here's number 3, the third arch, supplying blood around to this purple dorsal aorta. Notice there are 2 dorsal aortas here, and they fuse back to the back. Number 4 next, and then number 6 is shown. There's a number 5 right there with some dotted lines, so number 5 is gone. So this is our 3, 4, 6 arrangement of our anterior circulatory system. For the aortic arches 3, 4, and 6 remain. 1, 2, and 5 are gone. The blood supply comes from the heart through the conus arteriosus, here labeled truncus arteriosus, and into this aortic sac, sometimes called the ventral aorta. Now let's follow this through and see what happens to the dorsal aorta portions that were there in the first picture. In the second picture, the connection between the anterior part of the dorsal aorta and the posterior part is gone. So between 3 and 4, arches 3 and 4, we split the circulation there on both sides. So part of number 3, lead part of that dorsal aorta from the right side, number 3, leads toward the head and then becomes your common carotid artery. It's labeled internal carotid here, probably should be called common carotid there. The fourth arch on this side connects up to part of that the former right dorsal aorta here that did lead back. They show that it no longer connects with these dotted lines there. And that's going to become part of the subclavian. So the fourth leads into the subclavian on this side, and the fourth leads into the existing dorsal aorta, the left dorsal aorta, over on this side. And here's that split caused by the spiral valve in the conus arteriosus. We see the enlargement of the vessels after that spiral valve divides the 2 passageways. So at the base we have in the blue we have the pulmonary trunk, and then it leads into arch number 6 on this side. We lose arch number 6 over there on this side, that dotted line there, and we grow new pulmonary arteries off of the 6th arches that we had. So the dorsal aorta on this side, we have this anterior part here, and then it becomes our main dorsal aorta over on this side here. In the next picture down here, we have, this is all derived from the old aortic sac portion here, all the way up to the base of arch number 3. And there's part of that dorsal aorta over here. We really don't call anything 4 over here. We've kind of squeezed it out through the growth of other parts. So 3, the base of the pulmonary sac, and the dorsal aorta extending backwards there contributes to, this part contributes to the subclavian. There's your internal carotid, and that's your brachiocephalic artery there. Over on this side, we have the third arch component, the common carotid artery right through there. All that's left of number 4 here is shown as that little slight pink color, and then we have the dorsal aorta, the left dorsal aorta component posteriorly right there. Down here at the base, there's our pulmonary trunk. There's the remnant of our 6th arch coming up this way. These are new, the pulmonary arteries on either side. And then the final anatomy here, this is the aortic arch all the way across there. This was the aortic sac up to the brachiocephalic. This was part of dorsal aorta right here. This is all part of arch number 3 across here. 4 is about gone. There's not much left of 4 there, but it contributes to the connection to your dorsal aorta. So your 4th arch connection leads into the dorsal aorta, the aortic arch component that leads backwards here. And there's the remnant of the sixth arch right there labeled ligamentum arteriosum. No longer is it a ductus arteriosus. Here it's ductus arteriosus, the sixth arch component. And after you're born, that closes off, so you no longer send blood through that between the pulmonary and the systemic circulation. Here's another useful page from your textbook. This is showing the ventral side of the heart, and this was what we call conus arteriosus. They divide this conus arteriosus into the base they call bulbus cordus, and the upper part they call truncus arteriosus, leading into that aortic sac. There's your third, fourth, and sixth aortic arch components there. Inside of that, we see the formation of ridges in the wall of the conus arteriosus. And as it goes from the base of the conus arteriosus to the top, those ridges spiral around the inside wall. There's a twist to them. So if you cut through it up here at the top, you would see what they're calling truncal ridges, extensions of the wall that come in. That's a little bit reminiscent of what we saw with the endocardial cushion formation. These extensions inward, they're calling ridges here. And if you cut through it halfway down, you can see that as it twists down, it goes to the front and back. And then as you go all the way to the bottom, those ridges have completely reversed position from the first picture. So there's a twist inside, and that's shown here in this illustration. So you see part of the wall ridge going across this way, and from the other side there's one behind it going the other way. So there's extensions from the wall that grow toward the middle, and they undergo a twist between the base and the upper portion of the conus arteriosus. In the next picture, you see that those folds, those ridges, have come together to form a complete septum. They're calling it the aorticopulmonary septum. Aorticopulmonary septum. And here they show that the portion that will lead to the aorta is here in the front, in the upper part, leading into the aorta. The pulmonary trunk is to the back. Here in the middle reaches, the aorta is over on the right side, and pulmonary trunk is over on the left side. And in the lower portion of the picture, you can see that in that partition, the pulmonary trunk blood is to the front and the aorta to the back. And that's what we see in the final anatomy of the aorta and pulmonary trunk. We see the pulmonary trunk coming up right here. This is coming mainly off of the right ventricle right here on the right side of the heart, and it's moved around to the left side and eventually back to the back of the aorta. The aorta, coming up off the left side, moves behind the pulmonary trunk over to the right side and then makes this arch here. This illustration just shows how that partition that's grown together there reroutes the aortic blood over to the right side of the heart in the middle here, and separates the path of the ventricular blood from the left side and right side, so that we end up getting it into the right places and sending deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart to the lungs, and oxygenated blood that returns from the lungs is sent through the left side of the heart, the left ventricle, up through the aorta to supply the blood to the rest of the body, the oxygenated blood to the rest of the body.